Bestow is a mechanic that lets you pay an alternate casting cost for a creature, and if you pay that bestow cost, you cast it as an aura, enchanting target creature. Frequently, casting an aura is a risky proposition in Magic since you risk getting 2 for 1 if your enchanted creature dies. However, Bestow lets you get around that downside, because if the creature it enchants dies, or if its target is destroyed, it simply becomes a creature. So Bestow is some nice upside and modality to add to creatures. The mechanic was originally introduced in the enchantment-focused Theros Block, and it has since returned from time to time, most recently in Modern Horizons 3. In all, there are 43 cards with Bestow in Magic, and in this video we'll look at the 10 that have left the biggest impact on competitive Magic. This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. Use the links in the description to visit their store. Before we get started, here's a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. A first tier top 8 is worth 2 points, and a second tier top 8 is worth 1 point. Alright, let's dive into the list. At number 10, it's Chromanticore. For one of each color, it's a 4/4 with Flying, First Strike, Vigilance, Trample, and Lifelink, and it has Bestow for 2 generic and 1 mana of each color, and it gives the enchanted creature +4/+4 and those same 5 keywords. Chromanticore is hard to cast, but the body it gives you as a creature is one that has to be dealt with, and if you can ever bestow it, your opponent is really in trouble because it makes whatever you put it on into a huge threat, and then even if your opponent does deal with that enchanted creature, they're still going to have Chromanticore to deal with. Of course, the deck's Chromanticore has been played and rarely actually cast the thing. Instead, its success have come in both Modern and Pioneer Soulflayer decks. Soulflayer is a creature with Delve that gains the keyword abilities of the creature cards you exile from your graveyard when you cast it using Delve, so the deck's main game plan is to get a lot of creatures in the graveyard with keywords, like Chromanticore, and then play a very early Soulflayer with all of Chromanticore's keyword abilities. These decks found some brief success in Modern in 2018 and Pioneer in 2019. Chromanticore isn't likely to remain on this list for long, as there are a few Modern Horizons 3 Bestow cards that have 2 or 3 points that are right behind it. At number 9, it's Hopeful Idolon. For 1 white mana, it's a 1/1 with Lifelink, and it has Bestow for 3 generic and a white, and it gives the enchanted creature +1/+1 and Lifelink. Neither mode here is amazing. I mean, if this were just a 4 mana aura that offered that buff, it would be horrendous, and a 1 mana 1/1 with Lifelink is rarely playable either, but putting both on one card is a big upgrade. It found success in standard heroic decks, which were loaded up with creatures who like to be targeted, like Favorite Hoplite. Hopeful Idolon works nicely in that style of deck because it can not only target stuff, but it also isn't a terrible creature to buff with effects. Sure, it doesn't have heroic, but it's great to enhance lifelink creatures. More recently, the Idolon has been played in Pioneer, generally in SRAM decks, which love it when you cast auras. However, Hopeful Idolon doesn't have any points so far in 2024. At number 8, it's Narral Scarhide. For 1 black mana, it's a 2/1 that can't block, and its bestow cost is 3 generic and a black, and the enchanted creature gets +2/+1 and can't block. 1 mana 2/1s often see at least a bit of play in Standard as they're great 1-drops for aggro decks, but a 2/1 gets less relevant the longer the game goes on, so it's nice that if you get this later in the game, you can go the bestow route. Additionally, the Scarhide is a bit more modality than most bestow creatures. This is because you aren't only limited to bestowing your own creature. You can do this with other bestow creatures, of course, but most of those have purely beneficial effects. Not so with the Scarhide. Sometimes if you're an aggro deck, making an opposing creature unable to block can let you find lethal, and if it doesn't, you'll just enhance your own thing and not worry about the downside, since you'll be attacking anyway. Gnarled Scarhide has been played in mono-black aggro decks in both Standard and Pioneer, but it hasn't had a top finish since 2019. At number 7, it's Night Howler. For 1 generic and 2 black, it's a 0/0 with Bestow for 2 generic and 2 black, and the enchanted creature and it get +X/+X, where X is the number of creature cards in all graveyards. So if one or both players are putting lots of cards in the graveyard, Night Howler, or the creature it enchants, has the potential to be absolutely massive. Unsurprisingly, Night Howler was played in Golgari aggro decks in Standard, which had a very hefty graveyard theme, but Night Howler hasn't top-8'd anything since rotating out of Standard. At number 6, it's Hypnotic Siren. For 1 blue mana, it's a 1/1 flyer, and it has Bestow for 5 generic and 2 blue, and you gain control of the enchanted creature, which also gets +1/+1 and flying. Hypnotic Siren has a neat design that's unlike most of the other Bestow creatures, which tend to be relatively affordable creatures on the one hand and medium-costed auras on the other, but Hypnotic Siren is a very cheap creature that makes for an okay 1-drop, and then in the later stages of the game, it can do one of the most powerful things in all of Magic. It can steal an opposing creature. You can of course also stick this on your own creature if you just want the stats boost, but that's only something you're going to do when it wins you the game on the spot. It was played in Standard Devotion to blue decks in Standard, which were more than capable of generating that 7 mana, and usually earlier in the game than you'd expect, as a result of Nykthos, Shrine to Nyx, and the fact you could drop it on turn 1 to start pressuring your opponent and have some early devotion was nice too. However, Hypnotic Siren hasn't put up any top 8s since 2015. At number 5, it's Mogus' Warhound. For 1 generic and a red, it's a 2/2 that has to attack every turn, and its bestow cost is 2 generic and a red, and it gives the enchanted creature +2/+2, and gives it the same downside. This means it's another bestow creature that can be nice to put on an opposing creature on occasion, since forcing an opposing creature to attack can be good for you, although you definitely want to put this on your own creature the vast majority of the time. The Warhound was played in Boros heroic decks in block and red deck wins in Standard, but it hasn't put up any top 8 since rotating. At number 4, it's Idolon of Countless Battles. For 1 generic and 2 white, or a bestow cost of 2 generic and 2 white, the Idolon and the enchanted creature get +1/+1 for each creature and aura you control. So if your deck's good at going wide and likes auras, this can make an enchanted creature huge or just be massive itself. Unsurprisingly, the Idolon was played in Standard aura decks that took advantage of the aforementioned heroic mechanic, as well as other aura payoffs like Hero of Eroas. The Idolon found some success in Modern too, where it was briefly played in Birthing Pod decks. Those decks were loaded up with singleton creatures to tutor up with the pod, and if your board was built out correctly, the Idolon could be a great threat. However, the Idolon hasn't top 8'd anything since 2015. At number 3, it's Springheart Nantuko, the card that inspired me to make this list, and the only Modern Horizons 3 bestow creature on it right now. For 1 generic and a green, it's a 1/1 with bestow for 1 generic and a green. Anytime a land enters a battlefield under your control, you can pay 1 generic and a green, and if it's attached to a creature you control, you can make a token copy of that creature. If you don't pay that cost, you get a 1/1 insect token. In short, you get a 1/1 insect whether the Nantuko is a creature or bestowed on something, and if it is bestowed, you have the opportunity to pay a cost to make a token copy of the enchanted creature instead of getting the insect. Obviously, this Nantuko is crazy strong, as the base landfall trigger alone is quite good, so having the ability to slap this on something else for even more upside is great. Because it's from Modern Horizons 3, the only 60 card formats it's legal in are Modern, Legacy, and Vintage, and it has immediately made an impact on Modern, really helping the completely insane Nadu decks go off. While Nadu is definitely the deck's most important card, the Nantuko is a close second. This is because the deck's goal is to repeatedly target stuff for free with Shuko or Outrider Encore, and draw your whole deck thanks to Nadu's trigger. But Nadu does limit the effect to twice per turn for each of your creatures. That's where the Nantuko comes in. Because Nadu puts lands into play from your deck, you're going to get insect tokens, and each new insect token can be targeted twice to trigger Nadu some more. And you can see how that just results in you drawing your whole deck. Decks doing exactly this put up 5 top 8s at the most recent Modern Pro Tour. There's a really good chance that Nadu ends up being banned in Modern, and so far the Nantuko hasn't found anything to do in non-Nadu decks, but it is pretty strong, so I don't think we can discount entirely the idea that it won't find a new home. At number 2, it's Herald of Torment. For 1 generic and 2 black, it's a 3/3 flyer with a bestow cost of 3 generic and 2 black, and the enchanted creature gets +3/+3 in flying. And when it's an aura or a creature, you lose 1 life at the beginning of your upkeep. Notably, you are always the one who loses that 1 life, so this isn't an aura that you can put on your opponent's stuff and hurt them. But that's okay, because it's a super efficient flyer, or at least it was back in 2014, and if you bestow it, it makes virtually any creature into a big threat. The Herald saw lots of play in block and standard mono-black aggro decks, but it hasn't gained any points since 2015, and there's a good chance that Springheart Nantuko will pass it in the future. And at number 1, it's Boon Sader. For 1 generic and 2 green, it's a 4/2 with flash, and it has bestow for 3 generic and 2 green, and the enchanted creature gets +4/+2. The flash applies here whether you're casting it as an aura or a creature, which is pretty sweet, since +4/+2 at instant speed can blank removal, help a creature win combat, or do lethal damage out of nowhere, and the baseline here of a 3 mana 4/2 with flash is perfectly acceptable too. Boon Sader was played in standard aggro decks and was especially successful in Gruul and Selesnya, but it doesn't have any points since 2015. If Nadu decks are allowed to exist in Modern for long enough, Springheart Nantuko is likely to be the number 1 bestow creature within a few months. So those are the best bestow creatures. Do you like having creatures that can be cast as auras? Then check out the description, where you can find a direct Card Kingdom link for each card that appeared in the video. If you enjoyed this video, please like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to catch future videos, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to catch up on past videos, including many more that look at specific mechanics, you should see a playlist on your screen shortly. Thanks for watching.